Thanks. Thanks a lot. I'm just going to leave my phone to one side in case Rupert Murdoch calls. What she was going to say, she wants to make sure my only ambition is to become Chancellor of the Exchequer, and that's what I'll be. But there's no ambition to be the editor of The Sun or any other newspaper in the future. Can you say it's a real pleasure to be back in Newcastle? It really is. I came up yesterday. We had a meeting with local Chamber of Commerce and business leaders, and then I went to Mary Glyndon's constituency and met comrades there. And to be frank, with a name like McDonnell on St. Patrick's Day, I was getting a bit twitchy and was worried about would I miss the opportunity of celebrating St. Patrick's in the traditional way. But what was wonderful as I turned up with Mary to the Innisfree Club, and 2 pints of Guinness went down extremely smoothly. So thank you very much, Mary. I'm very, very grateful. And the attendance has just been incredible at every one, packed out. And I think that demonstrates that there's a huge thirst for ideas and alternatives amongst our membership, but also out there amongst the general public and across all sectors of industry as well. So it is fitting that we're here in a city which, well, the world looked to as a guiding light for economic development. And I say this as a Scouser, and it comes out difficultly. Yes, that led the Industrial Revolution a century and a half ago. But let's be honest, it's a region that's been robbed of its greatness by successive Conservative governments. This week, let's just mention the budget because let's tread on a private grief. I think we've just seen the most stunning display of incompetence from a Chancellor I've seen in 20 years in Parliament. We sat there and listened to the arrogance of Philip Hammond's speech on Budget Day itself. But we now know his authority is completely shredded after just one budget. He tore up his manifesto. I invented an iron rule of budgets, having watched them over 20 years, and it's this, that the louder the applause on Budget Day, the greater the disappointment by the weekend, 3 days after. This budget didn't last 3 days. It didn't even last 3 hours before it was shredded. We oppose, let's be absolutely clear about this, we oppose the increase in national insurance for the self-employed, and we did that from the moment he sat down after announcing it. Jeremy Corbyn made our opposition to the unfair tax hike loud and clear in his immediate response. Some of you will know the process for these debates because the response to the budget is the toughest gig. It is the toughest gig in Parliament. You do not know what's coming up and you have to respond immediately. What you get normally is about half an hour before, 20 minutes, the text of the speech. But this time, it was redacted heavily throughout. So sentences on one side of a page, maybe a bit of a paragraph on the next. So we were working on the basis of, yes, what had been leaked, etc. We expected the announcement on the self-employed, but what we also expected would there be an element of fairness in that. Why should we expect that? Because we thought if they do the tax hike, they'll obviously allow the self-employed access to the benefits that others get as a result of paying more. And when they announced it, it was a blow to the self-employed. And remember, the average pay of the self-employed at the moment is just over £12,000. So we're not talking about wealthy people. And this was a hit on middle and low earners. And it was a tax hike, but no benefits in return. And that's what made us angry and made others angry as well. And if you watch that debate, Jeremy was the first to nail it. Then after that, Labour MPs and shadow cabinet members over the next few days throughout that debate hammered the same message home. And yes, there was opposition from all sides of the House and from business organisations like the Federation of Small Businesses, who we've been working closely with throughout, and trade unions and others. And it left the Tory leadership completely isolated. And we said then, if Hammond had spent less time on preparing stale jokes and more on his job as Chancellor, he would have understood the consequences of what he was proposing. I want a Chancellor responsible managing our economy. I don't want a stand-up comedian, to be frank. And that's what we saw. So this is a government, let's be absolutely clear, this is a government that never deserved its reputation for economic competence. Their economic policies have caused, and she referred to it, real and lasting damage to our people and this country. And it was a political choice, wasn't it? Austerity was a political choice. It was never an economic necessity. And it's meant, and you know better than most, to be frank, that it's meant public services cut to the bone, and in some cases beyond. It's meant 1 million people now using food banks in the 6th richest country in the world. And it's meant, yes, investment falling, as she has mentioned, it's dragged down productivity too. Our economy has become too dependent on low-paid, insecure work. And yes, worse still, the spending cuts have hit hardest the places least able to bear them. Councils in the 10% of the most deprived local authorities have had their spending cut by £228 per person since 2010. So the most deprived, £220 cut. Councils in the 10% least deprived have had their spending cut by only £44. You know what that translates into politically, don't you, as well? It's the burden falling on Labour councillors while they do backroom sweetheart deals at Surrey councils and Tory councils right the way across the country. Do you know, when we were in government, look at the record of Labour governments throughout, we never manipulated the system in that way. We always made the system tackle need and deprivation, and it was based upon equity and fairness, not at distorted, sordid deals in the back rooms or over text exchanges between ministers and Tory council leaders. It's a disgrace and abuse of our political system. And after the referendum, you know, there was some brave talk from the Prime Minister and the Chancellor, and I can remember the quotes. If you remember, they were saying about pressing the reset button on fiscal policy, bringing about a real industrial policy. Now, we'd welcome both, to be honest. We need a fiscal policy that supports working people's living standards instead of tearing up public services. And we need a real industrial policy to deliver the decent, secure jobs of the future across the whole country. And that's what she's delivering in her team as well. But instead, from the government, we've seen nothing but the same old failures. And it should be very clear that they have no sense of direction as a government and no real vision of the future. And that's absolutely clear on Brexit. The concept of closing your eyes and charging at a brick wall is no way to deal with the negotiations in the future with Europe. And that's what we're seeing. But we've made it clear. As a party, we campaign to remain, but we campaign to remain and reform. But we respect the results of the referendum. And it was a clear vote to leave, not least here in the North East. But none of us, nobody voted for a deal that would trash jobs and trash people's living standards. And or lead the UK, and she's mentioned it, no one voted for us to be a tax haven on the edge of Europe the way that Philip Hammond is threatening. But that's what the Tories have now lined up. And they don't have a clue at the moment where to go next. They're pretending that no deal would be better than a bad deal. I don't think they seem to grasp that no deal would be the worst possible deal of all. So what we'll do is we'll fight for a deal that protects jobs and livelihoods right here in the UK. And that means keeping our full tariff-free access to the single market. And that's especially critical for the North East, which has a trading surplus, apart from other regions, has a trading surplus with Europe that must be protected. And the Tories won't fight for that. They're divided amongst themselves. Hammond not trusted by number 10. Boris Johnson appointed simply to tour around and insult foreigners around the world. Liam Fox to develop trade deals that have never existed and will never exist. And they refer to it, I don't know if you've seen the paperwork, they refer to it as Empire 2.0. Empire 2.0. That's the reality is that the reality of all this bluster is really simple, I think. the government has accepted, I think, the idea of the steady management of decline, of keeping those in charge today still in charge tomorrow. And to the hell with the rest? What Labour stands for is something very different. Our vision is extremely simple. We want an economy that's radically fairer, radically more democratic, radically more equal. Yes, based upon an economy that's prosperous, but where that prosperity is economically and environmentally sustainable. But where that prosperity is shared by all. We call it socialism. We call it socialism. It isn't. It's a vision of an economy that's not run, especially not run, for the benefit of an elite, but for the people. And that's because we believe the situation we're in demands action now. We can't wait for those in Westminster to sort themselves out. We've just seen in the last few weeks, this is a deeply dysfunctional government. Basic tasks like assessing the economic costs of the government's own approach to Brexit haven't been completed, and that was admitted by David Davis in front of the Select Committee this week. Tax increases that should have never been even thought of end up on a wish list at the end up in a budget, and then they get reversed in less than a week. Above all else, this is a government that thinks about the interests of a tiny metropolitan elite before it thinks of anyone else. The former Chancellor, yes, is heading off to edit a London newspaper, and at the same time, let's be clear, he's advising the world's biggest asset manager. He's working 4 days a month for £650,000, and he's still supposedly being paid to do his job as an MP. How the hell can he properly represent his constituents in Cheshire when he's editing a London newspaper? Or just take the current Chancellor, Philip Hammond. It's no wonder that he and the rest of the Cabinet didn't realise the implications of the national insurance contributions increase on many of the middle and low earners self-employed. Why didn't they? They're millionaires. They are millionaires. They're completely out of touch with the rest of the country. They do not live in the same world as the rest of us. And that's how they arrive at the decisions that they make. Those Cheers 3 figure, it isn't just about this government being rotten, it's the system that's rotten. It's the whole system. There's an establishment, revolving door. Just look at George Osborne's career to date. It's a system where too many decisions are taken too far away from the people who have to suffer them. And it means for decades those in Whitehall and Westminster have made decisions that prioritise the metropolitan elite before they think about anywhere else or anyone else. And it's a deep commitment to an ideology that always believes that public action is always wrong, but the markets are always right. And we can see where that economy has got us. It's the old rules have failed our economy, and every claim made by the people who supported those rules have turned out to be exactly wrong. Let's go through them. The belief that the financial markets would deliver stability actually led to the crash in 2008. The belief that wealth would somehow trickle down from the richest to the rest have led to a massive rise in inequality under that regime. The belief that free markets alone would deliver efficiency means that workers in deregulated Britain take 5 days to produce what workers in Germany or France take 4. A drop in productivity that's undermining our global competitiveness. The old rules have given us an economy in which too much wealth is held in the hands of too few. The rules have meant the economy was permanently rigged to the benefit of the elite and against the rest of us. The old rules have failed working people, and that failure now is virtually unavoidable under this government. And I think it's also a failure that actually did drive the vote to leave. The world is changing, and Brexit's part of it. The old idea that states could no longer play any role in the economy is breaking down right the way across the globe. We've seen this with the steel crisis last year, where steel dumping by China has been met by concerted state action, from tariff barriers in the US to nationalisation in Italy. And let me pay tribute to your local MPs who worked so hard in that steel campaign to expose the lies from government that states cannot intervene, because they can, and they did. And that is as a result of the work that your local MPs undertook. Eventually, the government was dragged into action as a result of that, but to be frank, it was too little too late as well for the North East. And more than a century of investment and expertise and wealth has been almost squandered as a result. And Labour, I tell you, will take a different approach and will make different choices. We'll commit to putting in place a real industrial strategy, as Chi has said. It will be focused on getting government to deliver for the local areas where the potential is now being wasted. That's not about looking back to past successes, although we'll build upon them. It's about looking to the future. It means supporting initiatives. Let's take an example like the Teesside Collective, which will build upon the natural advantages and expertise in the area to create a clean technology industrial hub. It will put this region at the cutting edge of carbon capture and storage technology. It will be a new, clean industrial renaissance for this area. It's a pilot project. It will cost £110 billion up front, £110 million up front, but the potential to deliver £31 million every year in savings for the government, time and time again. And on the back of the pilot, the potential for expansion is huge. The UK would become a world leader for viable carbon capture and storage. And alongside local leaders here, what Labour will do will be pushing that government to unlock the funding now. And in government, we'll back it up with a real commitment to deliver on research and development, spending on clean technologies in the future. And that means committing the £50 million needed to get the Metals Catapult Centre up and running. This will build upon the expertise that's already here in the region to accelerate the new metal technologies towards full commercial use. It will mean supporting a sustainable steel industry for future and securing those jobs. The UK Steel, Federation of Small Businesses, CBI, they've all written to the Chancellor and the Business Secretary to support this scheme. The government could fund it immediately. The plans are there, it just needs the funding. But like so much else when it comes to the North East, the potential is squandered by dithering and delay by this government. Stale Whitehall thinking is holding you back and this region back. Let me make it clear, Labour will crack through that. We'll commit to securing funding for the Metals Catapult, and together we'll unlock the potential of this region. But we can see where our future prosperity will come from. The North East, as I've said, is an export success story. It's the only English region to run a trade surplus with the rest of the world. And there are world-leading universities and research centres here. The Northern Powerhouse Independent Economic Review identifies specific strengths in advanced manufacturing, the life sciences, and in the digital economy. The ports in this region are expanding. New industries are growing up. And you can stand here and see just what it would look like in 10 years' time, how we can build upon these foundations to create an outward-looking, productive and fairer economy. But that means doing much more than making marginal changes of the past and hoping for the best, or thinking first and only about those places that are already successful. The real untapped potential of our country is not in those places where there's already growth and prosperity. It's the places that have been overlooked, that have been held back. It's the smaller towns, the smaller cities, the places that for 20 or 30 years have seen other parts of the country do so much better. It means that when we talk about rebuilding this country, we start with those places. And there's so much potential here currently squandered by underinvestment, delays and lack of a real commitment from Whitehall. So with our mayoral candidates in Manchester and Liverpool and councils across the north, Labour will be pushing for this government to deliver. Sue Jeffreys, our Metro Mayor candidate for Teesside, has put forward a comprehensive plan to deliver jobs and prosperity. We'll be backing that every step of the way as these mayors and Sue and others take on the government. But they're not just taking on the government, they're taking on the system that's failed the people of the North for too long. Because right now, the potential of the North East is wasted by this Conservative government. And I'll just give you the example, and some of these figures are shocking. Whilst London receives half of all transport investment made by the government, the North East gets 1.8%. That's almost £2,000 a head on London for transport infrastructure, and you get £220. So every £10 spent in London, at best you'll get £1. That funding gap has real consequences. It means that communities can't prosper when they could. It means that decent jobs can't be created that could be. It means decades of underinvestment by distant governments and their corporate allies turn, well, into real failures right here in local communities. After Brexit, the status quo just won't be an option anymore. We need a new vision for the North East, one that builds on, yes, the historic strengths, but looks to the future as well. It recognises the potential for the North East as a great manufacturing and trading hub in a global world, based on investment right here in its people and in its places, and facing the world with confidence, egalitarian, outward-looking, and open to the world. So the next Labour government will hand power back that Whitehall and the city have taken away. We'll hand it back to local communities right the way across the country. And we'll back this up with a real commitment to invest. Here in the North East, where the first commercial steam railway was opened, we'll build on its immense legacy of engineering and manufacturing success. We'll invest in new local rail, so every part of every county in this region can share the prosperity. Improving rolling stock, overhauling and expanding stations, electrifying lines that, to be frank, should have been electrified years ago. This is a £1.4 billion commitment to transform transport infrastructure in this region under a Labour government. It can be part of unlocking £20 billion worth of economic potential for the North, helping create 60,000 new jobs in this region. They're not my figures, they're the estimates of the Transport for the North. And the economic potential is enormous. And we'll do it by using the vehicle of our National Investment Bank. And the National Investment Bank mandate will be developed in discussion with local authorities, with mayoral candidates, with businesses and trade unions. And the National Investment Bank will have regional arms. They think I've been watching too many Games of Thrones when I say there'll be a Bank of the North. And that Bank of the North will have its mandate designed by yourselves. It will be democratically controlled. It will have £100 billion investment from government, levering £250 billion right the way across the country. As I say, to reach the potential of this region, we need to break with the past. And as I've said before, we'll oversee the greatest transfer of power to the North since the Industrial Revolution. We'll tear up the old rules. We'll break up the vested interests in Westminster and the City that stand in our way. Where the promises have failed you, we'll not. Labour will not fail this region. We'll help you build a new economy that works for the people, not for the elites. The new economy in the North can be somewhere that faces the rest of the world with confidence, where pride has been restored in every town and every community. The challenges ahead, yeah, they're immense, from Brexit to Trump and to climate change, immense challenges. But I believe with confidence and clarity of purpose, we can meet them. And it's not just meet them. If we can build together and work together, we can build that fairer, more democratic society and economy. But that transformation comes as a result of the mass involvement of our membership in the design of those policies, in the implementation as we go into power, and the support of Labour councils, Labour mayors and Labour governments in this coming period, when in the lifetime of one Parliament, we want to transform and rebuild our economy. And I remind you, a fairer, more equal, more democratic, prosperous economy, where the prosperity is shared by all. That transformation is starting in meetings like this that we've been holding all around the country, where people are absolutely determined. They're not going to take it anymore from Westminster or Whitehall. They're going to deliver and determine their own futures with strength and determination. Solidarity. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.